Hello, welcome back to the Brandon Lee page. In this video I want to talk about my first memories or introduction to when I first found out who Brandon Lee was and the first time I discovered him in the first films that I saw of him. So my first introduction to the late Brandon Lee in 1993, so I was 14, was when I first watched Showdown in Little Tokyo, which is this film, which is the video version that I have. Also, I have them all on DVD, but I also kept the videos as well, because it reminds me of when I first discovered the Brandon Lee films. So I first watched Showdown in Little Tokyo. To me it was a Dolph Lundgren film, and seeing his sidekick, who was played by Brandon Lee, I'd never seen him before, and I didn't even know his name or who he was. So it wasn't until that I watched Rapid Fire, which is a video version that I bought back then. Again, I watched this in 1994, so I would have been 15 at the time. I realised it was the same actor from Showdown in Little Tokyo, and that his name was Brandon Lee. I didn't know he was the son of Bruce Lee, the great martial artist, not until I watched Bruce Lee documentary The Legend, which was an early Bruce Lee documentary, and then after that, in 1994, when I first heard about The Crow, there was a lot of advertisement for it, which was on my parents' Sky movies at the time, and I remember watching a making of the film, and there was like a mini documentary about the film, and it was one of the special effects team that mentioned about an accident and the death of Brandon Lee, and I can remember just hearing this news, my jaw just dropped. I remember it very much, and my heart just sank as I was so excited about this new film, The Crow, coming out. I had no idea that he died. And it was just so sad when I found out about this. But this was, of course, after the theatrical release and when it came out to buy on video, and then you first got the his last interview footage. But it was like the first bit of extras on that, and of course with the DVD extras you have, there's quite a bit more, or even on YouTube now there's loads of footage from this film. So finally, when The Crow came out on rental video, first time watching it, I was blown away. It was something so new, so different, so original, and with Brandon's performance, it was magical. And he nailed the part of Eric Draven, which was the rock and roll musician that he played in the film. I finally had to find out everything I could on this film, and why it ended Brandon Lee's life so sudden. I bought myself my first figure, which is this figure, which was a model kit at the time, and this was my very first figure that I made up and painted, that you put together and paint. So it was my first bit of artwork for myself, and a bit of painting and making of this great figure of Brandon Lee. So so I would have made this and painted this when I was 15 years old, and absolutely loved this figure. So it reminds me a lot of when the film first came out, and then from there I got the comic book, which was at the same time. I've also shown this in a previous video. In more detail. So this is the first copy that I had. There's also an updated version. I'm not going to go into this in detail because I've already spoken about all that. And I was so fascinated by the story and creation, and the whole dark, gothic, deep place in a revenge world just gripped me reading this, and I was just hooked on the whole background story of the original comic and the creation of the film. I think back then in 1993, 1994, discovering Brandon Lee as the new upcoming mainstream film star excited me, but also saddened me a lot, knowing I was never to see him in anything else again. So there had to be more. I knew the 3 films, but there had to be more. So I found, eventually I found out that he did, which was the first main film he did, which was a Hong Kong production, which was Legacy of Rage. Again, brilliant film. And then a little later on, there was Laser Mission, or this title, it was called Soldier of Fortune. So again, this is the video version. Another great early film with Brandon Lee. And then also there was Kung Fu the movie with David Carradine, which is was like a TV film show for television. So that was around 1986, I think, when this came out. The same as Legacy of Rage was 1986. So they were the earlier films. So it was great to discover what he had done with his early work. So what was there I had learned about Brandon, as there are only 5 films and a few TV shows, a lot. So there's a lot that I would have learnt back then, and as I have now. As his father before him did a lot in his lifetime, that may take us a lifetime to do, for us to achieve. So it's pretty amazing, really, what you can do in a very short lifetime. It will always be sad and a lot of anger towards Brandon Lee's death. I do remember watching The Crow growing up, and it never bored me or of watching it. Even now, it still fascinates me, and it was the perfect little movie to springboard Lee's career to mainstream stardom. That only saddens me more. We will never get to see what could have been. But watching his films, talking about him, remembering him, is the way to keep his legacy alive for future generations to come. When we think of Brandon Lee, we think of The Crow, as it was his best film. But I do like to remember all his earlier films and his earlier work as well. So to me, it's a good reminder to live life to the full and with no regrets. And his life is a good example of that, and the same for his father before him, to achieve so much. And it's really great to keep learning and talking about Brandon Lee. But as we all know, The Crow was his finest work, and we will never know, like I said earlier, what could have been. So there it is for this video. So that's my little introduction to knowing and discovering who Brandon Lee was back in the early 90s, and being really excited and wanting to see more, only to be saddened with his passing. But so there it is for this one. So I hope you enjoyed this one for the Brandon Lee page, and hope to do more very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.